Ooh, I really like Jeremy's back. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Greetings. Glad to have you with us for this edition of Content Evolution New World. We're delighted to have a featured guest, special guests, um, and I'm going to ask you to pronounce your name, Jamais, because I get it wrong. All right, and I want to hear it again the right way.
Jamais Cascio.
Cascio. See, it's the last name. Jamais, I get right. All right.
Hmm.
Cascio is, I want to butcher that into something else, but I will eventually memorize it.
The thing
And
is,
that's
the
great.
pronunciation is easy. Cash O,
Yeah, I got that.
but it because it looks Italian, you expect you want to be Cascio or something like that. But
Well,
no,
it's because of the calculators from Japan.
that too. That too. I try to steer clear of that,
I, I, you know,
you
there's
can
an
imagine what it was like
extra,
growing up with that name and when those calculators first came out.
yeah, the extra C just kind of disappears in my, and I want to pronounce it that way, but Cascio is great. And more importantly, Germain is the inventor of BANI, brittle, anxious, incomprehensible, and the
Brittle, anxious, nonlinear,
nonlinear and incomprehensible. I got the
incomprehensible.
nonlinear, all right. I didn't get that in there. I was just going to buy. At any rate, it's actually thematically very appropriate for what we're living in right now. So that's why I emphasize, like the movie that was back in the 1960s, right? It's a banny, banny, banny world. Well, this is, it's just, it's worth repeating that that's the kind of world that we're living in at the moment. So, with all the turbulence, I said, let's have Jemay join us and unpack. By the way, he's about to publish a book, right? Now, he went to a legitimate publisher, so it's not going to be out until early next year, all right?
No, no, no. October 28th. October
Oh,
28th.
that's fantastic. All
Yep.
right. That's actually really timely. October of this year.
Hmm.
I'm delighted to hear that. All right. So we're going to get an early taste of it right now. Do you have anything you want to share on the screen, or are you just going to talk to us?
They still haven't come up with the cover art, and it's actually very frustrating.
All right.
The book
Well,
is entitled "Navigating the Age of Chaos: A Sense-Making Guide to a BANI World That Doesn't Make Sense."
great. Um, in fact, I'll one of the sense-making people on the planet, Dave Snowden, will probably actually like that. All right. So he can get a little upset, with lack of precision, but that actually sounds pretty right to me, right? Will likely sound right to him. So
Excellent.
come on in. The water's good, and you have a great group of here. We can have a conversation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A when we're getting close to the bottom of the hour. And my co-host is Mike McGuire. Mike is your neighbor um, out on the West
Yes.
Coast, all right? Redwood City, so close enough, right?
Yeah.
And Mike, glad to have you with us.
My pleasure. I mean, good to see you and looking forward to this update and eventually getting the book too. So
Excellent. Thank
please
you. Looking forward to it.
proceed.
When will we be able to pre-order, by the way, for an October?
Actually, you can pre-order now. You can
Oh,
pre-order now.
That's even better. All right, so we'll everyone, listen in, and if you like what you're hearing, then pre-order is the right thing to do. Go ahead, jump in.
So, just as a let's see, to start with, the book "Navigating the Age of Chaos" is actually there are three of us who are authors of it. I asked Bob Johansen, who is a uh, president emeritus of the Institute for the Future, 50-odd-year-old nonprofit foresight research group that I've done a lot of work with over the years. Bob has written quite a few business books with a strong future focus. So I asked him to come in part because he has a lot of experience doing this, speaking to that particular audience, but also because he's done a lot of work with VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But developing what he calls VUCA prime, which is vision, understanding, clarity, and acceptance. And so he has basically done a good job of trying to articulate what a positive version of these rubrics might be. And so he and I worked out what a positive BANI would look like. The other co-author is Angela F. Williams, who's the CEO of United Way Worldwide. And she has not contributed a lot of the writing, but she has worked with Bob and I to do a lot of the context setting and understanding of how this fits in with the broader world. And she's been actively using the BANI framework in her own presentations and talks around, literally around the world. She talked about it at the World Economic Forum just a few months ago. She also informed us that BANI, the pronunciation that is the obvious one, especially for those of, for me, you came from California, that's how you pronounce it. Apparently that it sounds a lot like a rude word in Eastern Europe, supposedly. And so she really pushes us on the BANI, which, as if it's BONNY, it's the BANI protocol.
Actually, if you remember the Stargate movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he gives them a chocolate bar, and he says "Bunny Way," which is tastes good, or I like it, right? And so that's a good pronunciation. That's
BANI.
cool. Yeah.
So we have a good half of the book is centered around what do you think of, or how do you work with a non-negative framework around BANI? And so in my work, I had come up with a number of what kind of responses do we have to the original recipe BANI world. And I had resilience and empathy and things like that, improvisation. Bob and I wrestled that into a BANI structure in order to keep the parallel of bendable with active resilience, attentive with empathy, neuroflexible with the improvisation, and interconnected, meaning a inclusive of diverse set of perspectives. With the last one, I actually wanted inclusive, but we were told by our publisher that right now, inclusive is something of a problematic term.
That's
which
why
is really
you probably
unfortunate.
changed neurodiverse to neuroflexible too, right?
Well, I wanted neurodiverse, but Bob actually really pushed for neuroflexible.
Okay.
I wanted was it neuro? Yeah. Anyway, neuroflexible improvisation. The idea here is that both in the book and in our larger conversation is that the BANI world is not one of problems and solutions. It's a world of dilemmas and responses. We are just the issues we face are too big, too complex, too deeply rooted to have obvious immediate pushback solutions. Instead, we need to figure out how to respond to them, help to ameliorate their harsher aspects, adapt to them when possible. And the second half of the book, about the positive BANI, is not so much at the same scale as the big massive negative BANI issues that we talked about in the first half. Things whether we're talking about collapsing ice shelves or the Kessler cascades of destroyed satellites and things like that. The second half is much more intimate and personal because it's not so much about what steps do you take to fix all this. It's how do you cope? So it is, in many respects, this is a weird mashup. This book is a weird mashup of business book, politics book, and self-help guide. Because it really does focus on how do you, as a person, an individual, or as the leader of an organization, how do you deal with chaos? What are the things that you need to, what are the perspectives you need to really look into? What are the approaches you need to take to be able to work and thrive in this kind of world? So the structure is, the first half is all of the original BANI stuff. Look how scary the world is and the world will be. Second part is okay, how do we cope with this? And then the last part is I wrote a section on a chapter on scenario planning, and really what is a BANI flavored, BANI inflected version of scenario thinking, foresight thinking. And Bob wrote a fairly rich chapter on how leadership works in a BANI world. And so that structure of sort of show you what the big picture crisis is, let you think about how do you adapt as a person, how do you deal with this as a person, as a community, as a leader, and then what are some actual tools that you can use in your work.
Yeah, it's interesting. The coping piece, which is the middle of the book, sounds a lot like boundary spanning to me. If you're familiar with, that body of literature that you're
I'm
sitting,
not.
well, it's that you're on the edge between the inside and the outside, right? And so a customer service and support person, or a salesperson, or other people, a diplomat, okay, are having to represent the inside to the outside world, and the outside world, the inside of the organization. And as a result, there's a lot of role stress that's associated with it. And this was studied very rigorously in the 1950s because there was a lot of burnout, right? People are just, and so, but I think BANI sounds like, high stress burnout, right, kind of environment.
It is.
And they said, what's the solution? And they said, well, the only solution that we can understand is recognition of the role, right? Is that if you understand that you're a boundary spanner, and that it is a high stress role, but it's a very responsible one, right? Is that in recognizing that you're in that position, that's the way that you cope, right? Is that if you don't understand it, if you don't know why you're being stressed out, then it's going to spiral out of control. But if you understand it, you start to begin to have those coping mechanisms, and that sounds like a BANI world to me, or a person that can navigate it.
That is actually a very strong parallel. I like that quite a bit. One of the things that we emphasize across the 4 positive BANI elements is that this is about, in some respects, taking care of yourself, but also preparing for the unexpected. You prepare for the unexpected by building up your resilience, which really often includes having backup supplies, backup plans, not relying on just-in-time efficiency. Instead, really being ready for being aware of the potential for disruption, and being able to surf that, dance with that, is the Bob way of phrasing it. With the attentive or empathy, this is all about recognizing that other people are experiencing this too, and that you're experiencing a chaotic situation. There's a good deal of conversation or discussion in the book about essentially being kind to yourself. And one of the things that we have come to recognize across the last decade is that very often people are feeling like they have no power, but they should. They didn't do the right thing. And this is about, not everyone can do the right thing at all the right time. Sometimes the right thing just isn't possible. And so there is a great deal of emphasis on empathy for yourself and for others. Yeah, so I don't know if you're familiar with the term Sonder. It's a perspective that, I don't know, I first started reading about it about 10, 20 years ago. But it's the idea that the what happens in your brain when you recognize that everyone else around you has the same kind of rich internal life and fully complex life that you have. And it's actually kind of a occasionally a mind-boggling thing to be sitting in traffic on the highway and seeing, hundreds of cars around you and thousands of cars passing you on the other side of the highway, and realizing that every single person there is going through whatever they're going through at the same level of intensity and anxiety that you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a great deal of emphasis on how do you be kind to each other and to yourself. Um, and what's the role of empathy and mirror neurons and just the complexity of empathy in our brains.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
sounds like it's highly related to being fully present.
Yes, that's actually a good part of the conversation or discussion that Bob puts forward is around being present. Um, with neuroflexible or improvisation, it's recognizing that the existing rules, existing checklists often don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to recognize that situation and move quickly, think on your feet, essentially. Um, the and one of my favorite definitions of intelligence is how you know what to do when you don't know what to do. That
Mm-hmm.
is, when you don't have a preset checklist of do this, do this, do that, how to figure out what the next step should be. And and it's actually a really sometimes a difficult phenomenon when to be in a situation where you don't know what to do when you know the checklists, the established patterns are wrong. And so thinking through that, how do you deal with that kind of situation? And lastly, the interconnected or inclusive of diverse perspectives is really about broadening the circle of people that you connect with. Not relying on just a particular kind of philosophy or ideology or field of study. Broadening your network. And these all sound like a self-help book, but really, these are the basis for how you grapple with a world of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things that I've come to recognize is that much of the chaos in the United States that we're experiencing is, has been based on policies and practices that are directly antagonistic to the BANI positive responses. So it's not like the administration isn't trying to make things more brittle, but is doing things in ways that really undermine our ability to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
So eliminating funding for the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, and all that. These things that make us able to respond deeply. You sort of go down the line. Empathy. How many of you have been hearing about empathy as a sin? I mean, literally,
Mm-hmm.
Elon saying that on his Twitter feed, and I'll never call it X. His Twitter feed, empathy is a sin. Um, and the issues around neuroflexibility, improvisation is: are you doing what you're supposed to do? Well, if you aren't following the checklist, you're wrong for a lot of the people who are in charge right now. And we can say the same thing and obviously around inclusiveness and diversity of thought. And so it feels, like you said, this feels like the perfect moment. My main fear for the book right now is that it is overtaken by events of the summer. Um, there is, I think, from thinking not as the BANI person, but really as a anticipatory historian, is the way I like to think of foresight work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I strongly suspect that this summer could be very violent and very disruptive in the United States. These summers tend to have more violent activity around politics and the like. There are a number of things happening right now that just could really just cascade into something really tragic. And I'm afraid that about the possibility that a book that seems in the beginning of 2025 to be kind of provocative may look by the end of 2025 to be kind of cautious.
Well,
And
but I mean, the fact is the relevance persists, the context of it changes,
yeah,
right? And, indeed what you're, suggesting when you get to the end of the book and you're talking about scenario planning is there was an interesting, I mentioned Dave Snowden earlier, is he recently said something that I agree with, which is he said, foresight is actually in many cases really forethought. Okay. What we're doing is we're imagining different possibilities and we're thinking about them in advance. Okay. We're not clairvoyant. Okay.
no,
And the fact is that in spending time in forethought, you're better prepared when things actually start because you can see the signals, you can see the triggers, you can see the triggers as opposed to being triggered. Right.
one of my favorite parallels for foresight work, for scenarios, whatever, for forethought, is vaccination, immunization.
Yeah.
Because when you get vaccinated, what you're doing is you are sensitizing your body to a pathogen that you may not ever encounter.
Right.
But if you do, your body is ready for it. Similarly, with scenarios and foresight work, what you're doing is you're becoming sensitive to possibilities that might not actually happen. But if they do, you can see those distant early warnings. You can see those early signs of them. And one of the things I often say in my talks is that nobody can actually actively predict the future. What we can do is we can look ahead and see possibilities. I know I'm going to be wrong. My goal is to be usefully wrong. That is to be able to give you an epiphany, raise your awareness of possibilities that you hadn't considered before, so that when you see the early signs of those particular possibilities emerging, you recognize them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I tell you what will happen. I tell you what could happen and what you need to be looking for along the way.
As reading in your background, because you've advised people on movies, right? Films, right? And so on and so forth, to give them some sensibility of here's some other things you might want to consider, right? That could happen as a result of your script or your premise and so on and so forth. Is your book arrives at a moment where if this was a heroic journey story, is we've been ripped out of the real world and put into, the alternative world, right? Hey, look, Luke, okay, you might as well go on the adventure with me because your farm just burned down, all right, in Star Wars, right? All right, because there's no home to go back to, right? So let's take the adventure, right? And you could either stay in that chaotic state or start to end up in Act 3, which is, hey, I pulled the sword out of the stone, right? There's an elixir. I've discovered the force, that there's something that happens that's transformative that allows me to recontextualize what's happening. And now I'm prepared to do something about it because I'm different, right? I mean, we can all be the hero of our own story if we will simply withdraw permission to, keep on punching our amygdala, okay, with, social media memes, right, that are, just, meant to provoke as opposed to having any basis in reality. And as you know, I don't, I like to have people foundationally get rid of unjustified assumptions about things, because once you start to clear that out and you do an inventory of, well, what hasn't changed? All right. You start to create a foundation for, okay, now I can adapt. Right. And I think your book is in addition to resilience, I think it's a guide to adaptiveness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm spending a lot of time thinking about adaptiveness. Right. And it sounds like this is a, great read in that space. And we're all looking forward to hearing more. I'm going to bring Mike in. Mike, you've been listening. What's what are your big thoughts, ideas before we get to the bigger Q&A?
And
This is a very
criticisms.
rich
I'm honestly
conversation.
really welcoming of people telling me that not just wrong, I'm fallaciously wrong. I want to be able to hear that too.
Well, guess what? All right. We're not shy here.
Good.
Not shy. I'm not sure I have that stone at this point in my hand, Jermaine, but it was as you said, you know, your feelings about your not predictions, right, but your sense of the next several months struck me. I think a lot of us have had that kind of that lower part of the brainstem, you know, tingling, kind of waiting. However, I guess, and this may have just been the turn of phrase, how does one adapt to the fear without perhaps increased stress on myself as an individual and those around me? Do you see what I'm getting at? I'm not
yes,
sure
I do.
that works, but that was my immediate response.
Well, the adaptation
I know I have to
aspect,
read the book too. I'm sure there's an answer in there, but
maybe. And I'm going to be honest here that it's probably not going to be the exact answer that you're looking
Right.
for any of these questions, but will hopefully point you in the right direction.
Right.
With regards to adaptation to chaos, it's not so much being okay with it. It's being, being resilient to it. That is, being able to be flexible and bend with it, but also be rooted. So, you know, if you are amidst chaos, amidst a violent situation, it's not, reading this book is not going to tell you how to be calm and pleasant. It's really going to be, here are the things you need to keep in mind. You know, you need to be able to reach out to other people to build that network. You need to be able to, you know, have the physical capacity to withstand a disruption. You know, so you have those extra supplies, you have that emergency kit. I mean, one of the small lessons that we talk about in in that section, in the resilience section of the book, is about many of the companies in California who had plans in place around a big earthquake,
right,
were better prepared to deal with COVID. Not because they were in any way the same, but because a lot of the effects of an earthquake, that is, inability to leave your home, inability to carry out have your supply chains work, and all of these are things that also applied to the COVID world. And
right.
so it's not like they were ready to go, but they were better positioned to be ready. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about in the book are not so much around how to make your life pleasant in this kind of situation,
Right.
but it's how not to make your life worse.
Understood.
Yeah.
That's
So I appreciate that.
That's fantastic. By the way, I found the link for the pre-order in the on Amazon. I'm not suggesting that you have to order from Amazon, but I found it, and as you said, no image available. All right, so I see that it's on its way. Maybe like you're describing here is your cover is part of the three body problem, right? Is that the world's changing. We have a text, but what should we put on the cover, right? It's dynamic, right? Let's see what happens.
Well, let's not draw too much attention to it now, so it doesn't get attacked before we're ready.
Well, the link works, all right? The pre-order will work, all right?
Yes.
Ben, you put some thoughts into chat. Join us.
Hi, great. It's a fascinating space, and it reminded me of two classic tomes, the the Anabasis of Xenophon. And when you look at the the March
What
of
is
the
that?
Ten,
Is it, describe what that is. I don't know what that is.
well, it's either a soup or or, or it's a classic story about 10,000 mercenaries in 400 BC who were stuck behind the lines when the war ended and had to forage themselves in their march to the sea, their anabasis. And it was written by an individual named Xenophon. And it's a wonderful rendition of how to organize and reorganize continuously given situations, improvisational leadership structure, and how under different conditions you not just respond, but you have to restructure yourselves and reorganize under different conditions. It's a fascinating story of leadership improvisation. And that also reminds me of another classic read that I've always favored is the Relación by Cabeza de Vaca on the march from uh, the Spanish ship that was lost in Florida, and how the 11 headed out to walk all the way to Mexico City, and 9 arrived in there. But all the adventures in dealing with communities that were transitioning from the Stone Age, uh, in as they encountered different worlds continuously, and how they had to act and react and continuously reshape themselves in the chaos of their journey. So I commend those to those who are interested in the space. And by the way, say hey to Bob for me, please.
Okay,
Thanks, Ben.
I will.
Everything that you were saying kept on triggering me about that you were talking about subsections of the Douglas Adams stuff, right? That, oh, that's the improbability drive in action, right? Well, whatever. Okay.
That kind of preparation, I really, in particular, appreciate the anabasis of Xenophon. I was had it up on Wikipedia there on my other screen, just checking it out. I really wish that I had been familiar with it before writing the book, because I think that is a really wonderful parallel. And something I try to do in the book is make it a bit literate. Yeah, I'm not writing just for business leaders who need to be able to read the thing in 5 minutes. Short words, short paragraphs. I am really trying to make it sound like it's something that I'm telling you, something that I'm talking about. And these kinds of references are exactly the kind of thing that I would have loved to put it. Second edition. It'll go into second edition.
Yeah, I was going to
There
say
you go.
either second edition or because it'll attract a lot of references and stories, or a website, that has, that is an open invitation to give us, all right?
Mhm.
Did you follow how Joe Pine was writing his book about transformation? He actually opened a Substack and said, okay, here's my thing. Now, please comment, give me stories, and so on and so forth. And he basically wrote the book as a conversation, right?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's
it was
wonderful.
really cool. And I said, that's a very interesting approach, one that's, probably going to gain in popularity because he likes to start
doubt.
those kinds of things.
Let me read just a couple of lines of takeaways from Anabasis,
Okay,
and see
please do.
how they resonate with you. Number 1, step forward when no one else will. Number 2, frame a narrative to rally action. Adapt structures to match reality. Use local knowledge and improvise tactics. Balance decisiveness with consensus. Manage energy, not just strategy. And act ethically under pressure. And
Yeah.
see
So-
if any of that echoes in your
And
rendition.
circa what again? Those
That's-
what you're quoting there is circa what age? How
Well,
far?
this the story is 400 BC.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay, it's 400 BC. All right,
Yeah.
stood up, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Resonates.
Holds up.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah. Actually, looking at a PDF of the book because there are actually some really nice parallels. You know, one thing that Bob does, Bob was the primary author on the second part about the positive BANI when I went in and made it my language. He actually he lists out a number of approaches, coping skills that really completely resonate with what you just listed out. And I'm trying to find a good, basically what are the techniques, but I'll post it later if I can't find it. But one of the things that is a driving theme in the book and in our discussions around BANI is a line that a colleague of mine back at Global Business Network way back in the 90s sort of used in an offhand way. She didn't even remember saying it when I brought it up later. The future is uncertain, and yet we must act. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we need to act as if we do.
Right.
Or in preparation for it. I have Zoom user waving his hand in a little window.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I will get to learn how to correct. Every time I come into this meeting, it switches me to Zoom user. I watched your video and was
This is
really
Robin
pleased.
Lobb, by the way,
Sorry,
joining
Robin
us
Lobb.
from, because we're going to get on a session and help him change his name from Zoom user to Robin Lobb. Okay, go ahead.
And yeah, I just wanted to say that what you're doing is interesting, in particular for the folks I work with, which is the intelligence community,
No.
who and how they do education. So just briefly put, it's interesting what you're saying because we have to look at using very imperfect information with very inadequate time. And so we have to build containers for the user and from us to explain the context, issues that we need to be aware of. Sorry, thank you.
No, thank you. That fits with my understanding of the background of some of the stuff that we talk about in the book. And Bob in particular has worked with the U.S. Army War College. Originally, the source of VUCA, rather, back in the late 80s, who are actually in some cases starting to replace that with BANI. And that's just aside from the book, one of the things that's been really absolutely remarkable about all of this is just how quickly and widely the BANI framework has been picked up. I mean, the very first set of people who started responding to it were all from the global South. People in Brazil, people in there was an academic conference in Sri Lanka in 2022 about BANI. It's that kind of feeling of recognition that this is such a global phenomenon. It resonates for people. It has meaning for people, and that's just mind-boggling and humbling to think that I came up with something with that is actually important to people, and I will forever be grateful to everyone who responded to it. And, whether it's folks in business leaders in South India or folks like Kevin right here who have really been helping me refine the thinking. Who is it that, God, sorry, Bob wrote to me. He basically passed this along to General Flynn. No, not Flynn. Now I'll have to go back and look. Basically, one of the person who was in charge of the War College during 9/11, and got a very positive response from him about just how much this seems to speak to the present moment and to the coming moments. One of the things that we really have tried to do with this book is have it speak not just to what we're experiencing now, but the ways in which this will evolve. This situation will evolve over time, help us be anticipatory about it. Not predictive, not knowing what will happen, but be ready for whatever it does.
Sure. I mean, there are all kinds of frames and time frames that could be, useful here. In short cycles, OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, in, like Navy SEALs or, Army Ranger, kind of, context of, here's your mission and we're not going to tell you how to do it. Just go ahead and do this as, based on the circumstances that present themselves to you.
Right.
Versus, a U.S. business trying to compete with organizations that are creating 100-year plans in Asia, right? Where we don't think in 100-year cycles, right? But,
No.
there are other actors that do, right? And it's, where are you placing yourself? What do you think the actual opportunity frame is for you as an individual, as a team, as an organization, as a society or nation state or whatever, right? Because it's kind of scalable in a lot of different ways, right? And let me ask you this, because I have another hand up for the moment, but we certainly welcome anyone else jumping into the conversation. Where do you like to practice? You like to write books, so you're an author, right? But, where do you actually like to insert yourself into conversations where, you think you can make a difference, right? Is it, I'm going to leave that open-ended. Where do you like to practice?
On stage.
Okay, so
I am one of those people that put me in a small gathering, a reception or party. I want to spend my time in the corner playing with the cat. Put me on stage in front of 5,000 people, and I'm in my element.
Okay.
And so being up there, being able to move fully. When I actually have something other than just this tiny little camera rectangle, I tend to be very effusive with my hands, and I put a lot of energy into the presentation such that I want to impart meaning to people and be able to explain aspects of the world that they hadn't considered. My favorite phrase for this kind of work is, I want to be an epiphany engine. I want to make it so that people have that moment of recognition that the world is not what they thought it was.
Okay.
And so that kind of that's where I like to have a presence. That's where I like to be that point of insertion, is not so much in their consulting. I'm happy to do the consulting work and engaging one-on-one or one-on a small number with, in that kind of situation. But I feel like I am best able to articulate my ideas when it's in that kind of almost performance format.
Sure. Well, you're publishing a book, you've got some strong co-authors, right? There's a TED Talk in your future for sure, right? An 18-minute or 12-minute video, but who's representing you? You got a speakers bureau under your belt?
I do not, because everyone I have worked with has failed me. I have worked with several different speakers bureau, and they've all kind of flaked on me, and it's been very frustrating. So, if any of you have a recommendation of someone to talk to, an agent to talk to, please pass it along, because I would. This is what I like to do.
Okay.
And I've been doing it pretty successfully in the pre-COVID era, at least. And I would like to continue doing it.
All right, that's great. That's a good ask. And I just recently hooked up with a new, organization, Speak-In, out of Asia, Singapore.
Okay.
So we'll talk separately about that. Let me, Suzanne, let me get you in the conversation for a second. Some of the things that you navigate, BANI probably sounds like Old Home Week, doesn't it?
It does. I I just see so many opportunities for this, you know, for prophetic abilities, or, you know, yeah, I understand the caution in clairvoyance, but you know, it is when you know, just know that something is coming, and then a settling event, a civil war, and you
Yeah.
know, and there's been too many times when you had a knowingness, and it's come true, right? And it's conversations like these and within groups like this where you have a safe sandbox to talk about things like this, and it is a way, you're right, it is a way to approach fear and to be able to share amongst each other um, these ideas, how crazy they can be, but and they're not crazy, but I love this approach. I'm so excited to get your book, and I hope you do talk about clairvoyance and using these capabilities for good, and focusing and, you know, tunneling your energy into sharing the concerns. Those groups are really far and few between, right?
Yeah.
That where we can say, this is what I think is going to happen, and you don't have to explain why, right? It's just always happens, and then you're dealing with that alone, or with just very select few people. And I've been fortunate with the intelligence community for people that have embraced this. Okay, they're using this BANI, they're using it already, and it is to find order in the chaos. So I
Right.
think doing is fantastic work. It is, it's amazing, and it's like stuff that's going on with the Monroe Institute that I work with sometimes, and it's just like a cool environment, especially here, that Kevin has brought together, where we can all have a safe place to entertain and expand on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks for joining us, Suzanne.
Totally glad.
Kevin, would you mind if I read just a little bit from the conclusion of the
Yeah, I'd
book?
love it. Do it.
Let's see. Science fiction writer Bruce Sterling once said in a talk, "The future is a process, not a destination. Sometimes the process is understandable, if difficult. Sometimes it can be completely chaotic, but it doesn't stop. It would be nice to have a little help figuring it all out. In a chaotic world, the desire to be told how to make everything better can be overpowering. Because it speaks so clearly to our present dilemmas, BANI and BANI Plus, BANI Positive, can sometimes appear to be laying out an unavoidable trajectory for our futures. If you're not paying close attention, it's easy to mistake clarity for certainty. But BANI doesn't tell us what disasters will definitively happen, nor does it reveal optimal strategies. What BANI can do for the future is offer a way of looking at the world, a lens, that lets us ask good, important questions about possible disasters and potential strategies. We don't need to have immediate answers for these questions. The important dynamic is that we ask them and really think about what the answers might be. A lens can show us the world with greater focus and clarity, but it cannot tell us where to go. Instead, the purpose of a lens is to help us see and understand our possible paths ahead and to recognize the urgency with which we need to move. Ultimately, it's a tool that can help us see more clearly, to help us navigate. Foresight is a discipline that demands clarity, as the concepts we immerse ourselves in are often quite messy. Foresight is intensely metaphorical and relies heavily on our ability to pick out patterns from noise. We're forced to push our causal cognition to its limits. We can't truly predict the future, but we can describe what we recognize when we imagine it. Sometimes the patterns we see are deceptive or illusory, derived from what we want or what we fear might happen. Sometimes the patterns we see give us a distant early warning of onrushing transformations. And sometimes the patterns we see can even give us hope. The future is not a separate space. It's a continuous unfolding of the consequences of today. It is a creation of the present. The BANI future is and will be the continuously evolving result of the BANI world in which we find ourselves now. How BANI manifests in 5 years or 15 years will undoubtedly differ considerably from how it manifests today. But the core reality of a world that's brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible, as well as bendable, attentive, neuroflexible, and interconnected, will remain. What our tomorrows look like will depend upon how we balance the two forms of BANI today. So
No,
Wow,
that's
that's a flavor,
fantastic.
that's a sense of it.
that's incredible.
Um,
I love it. That's great.
Thank you.
so, as we, get up to the, top of the hour, and it seems to me that the ability to see BANI indicators, and that, BANI itself is, it's a typology of scenario, all right?
Yep.
Itself, all right? Because you could pick up, signals and flags that are associated with brittleness, okay? Signals and flags, all right, for things that are, showing anxiousness or incomprehensibility or nonlinearity, all right? And I, I, I think that we'll have a separate conversation about that, because I think that there's a, potentially something there that's platform like that would, help get you on stage more often. But I'll also point this out, is that the place where you used to spend a lot of time just prior to your current existence, which was Institute for the Future, right?
Mhm.
Were you a fellow? Is that what your role was?
Distinguished fellow. no less.
Distinguished fellow. Okay.
Yes, they
So
gave me a top hat and monocle.
you went from distinguished to extinguished fellow. All right. So
Well, and I still do some work.
oh,
with
do
them,
you?
but
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
wasn't
a very
sure.
it's a very friendly relationship.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Well, one thing that I pointed out to leadership there at one point, having been, invited as a subject matter expert for some of the roundtables,
Mhm.
it is that there was an expressed frustration in, why doesn't the world do more with the things that we put out, right? The narratives and the scenarios and so on and so forth. And what I pointed to is, I said, the people who do resource allocation want you to quantify the narrative, right? And I actually got an active rejection, right? That said, no, we don't want to do that, right? And I would just point out to you, as you're moving into this next space, you're putting out a very good narrative, right? That's describing this. It needs to be complemented with an index of things that are quantifying the emergence of one or more of the things, not just more narrative, right? Because if you're going to attract resources for actually seeing change in the world, the people who have their hands on those controls in the CFO's office, if it's an enterprise, want, their language is not language. Their language is numerical. And it's just an interesting divergence of, that's not what we do, right? And I think it should be, it should be a both and, right, in terms of being multilingual.
It's funny because actually there's a chunk of the early part of the book where I talk about that there is no calculus of anxiety, that a lot of this is simply not quantifiable. And I truly appreciate what you're saying, and I recognize, God, I've been doing this kind of work for over 25 years.
Right.
I really do recognize that the Cassandra phenomenon of being able to say something really smart about what's happening
Yeah.
next and have the client go, interesting, on the shelf.
Right.
And it's a perennial frustration. But I'm not sure, and I would be happy to talk with you about this, especially after the book comes out, when we can really dig into it, how this might be quantified, or what are the ways we can articulate this in ways that can be measured, where there can be metrics. I'm not sure quite how to do this, because there really is a strong focus on narrative here.
I got that. And what I'm saying to you is, like the collection plate going around in the church, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and unto God which is God. I mean, the point is that no, it isn't all necessarily quantifiable, right? I'm only saying that for those things that are susceptible to quantification, it should be there, right? In other places where, metaphysics doesn't allow it to be because it's values based or it's something else, right?
Hmm.
Then absolutely accept that, right? There's kind of a scale here, right? And I would just suggest that to see more action in the world,
Yeah.
you would want to bring in the people who are speaking that language too. That's all.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I will, yeah, I do try to be open-minded. The quantitative approach has never been my particular field of expertise. And so, and yet I recognize that it's extraordinarily important, especially for the people who need to hear this kind of conversation. And so I am very happy to hear suggestions, hear arguments, hear opportunities. And so I really look forward to that conversation. I know it's not something I can do on my own. And so I very much welcome the participation and support of people who can take a different perspective. That's the whole idea behind the interconnected and inclusive. Expand your network of people that you work with.
Yeah. Mike, this has been a great call.
Fantastic.
What's your closing ask of Jamais, and then we'll wrap up here.
Well,
Yep.
get those guys to hustle it up on the cover art.
Yes.
First, but second, I would say, the one thing I didn't get a chance because the conversation was just so brilliant, but I know it's gonna be in the book, or it's gonna be I will be directed to this in terms of my futurescape, which is in that world that we're discussing as it evolves. I guess it's the eternal question, right? To pilfer from a song lyric. How do we identify what we need, right, to take with us as we move into that next phase, and what do we leave behind?
Right.
And that may be a future thing after we all have had a chance to review. I would posit, Kevin, that maybe that might be an interesting topic once we've all had a chance to review. Is because when we think about mores and cultural things, is this our reconstruction moment? I'm not sure. There are moments where it feels like that to me, but I think that'll be an interesting about what do we take with us. I mean, besides all the, for lack of a better phrase, hardware and physical things or entities we've designed. More importantly, kind of again, the mores, the sorts of what we think as common cultural touch points and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be an interest. It's always an interesting topic, but I think in particular as we transition, so to speak, I think it'll be important.
Well, I can tell you that that navigating the age of chaos doesn't give you an answer to that, but I think it does very fully seed the ground for that conversation.
Good, and I'm glad to hear that, because I would hope that it didn't provide, because if it did, then I'd be a little concerned, right? As somebody a lot smarter than me once said, they're guaranteed that if they have the answer to this problem, it's probably not true. But anyhow, thank you so much. We're looking forward to the book.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on, Kevin.
Yeah, you bet. And it's always stimulating to have you on these calls, and we can kind of see your mind working, right, as we talk. And I think that is manifest when I see your clips of you on stage too. So let's move things forward. Let me just say that pre-order the book, links in the chat, and if you have a recommended place for Jamais to speak to a group, you probably have places that you're connected to. He would be a good pick, right, as we move forward. And don't wait for the book to come out, all right? It's always good to put somebody on stage, you know, to preview the book that's about to come out, all right? So all the best. We will talk again soon. And in
Good.
everything you do, be intentional. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care.